So welcome everyone. Welcome to our first event of the year, which is our webinar, part of the webinar series. And today we are talking about careers in academia and beyond with Dr. Aaron Fenster. So before giving the floor to our speaker, I'd like to say a few words about the MICCAI Student Board. The Student Board is an initiative since 2010, and our mission is to stimulate the involvement of students, enhance student networking in the community, and advise the MICCAI Board on matters of relevance for students. We are a very heterogeneous group of students, and I'm Ilenia Zaratano, the webinars officer, and today with Mariana da Silva, the public relations officer, will be the moderators of this session. As you know, we organize events throughout the year, and especially during the MICCAI conference, events such as the academia industry events, but also webinars. Last year, we organized the mental health webinar and also how to work effectively from home. And we organize also social events, walking tour, food tasting, and online events such as the MICCAI Game Night and sports with yoga classes. Another important event that we organize every year since 2014 is the MICCAI Educational Challenge. You can submit tutorials and educational material that are relevant for the MICCAI community, and you can submit them in the form of video, blog posts, scientific paper, notebooks, and also GitHub source code and documentation. The deadline for the submission is the 26th of July, and the prize is $500, so sponsored by the MICCAI Society, of course. And if you want to know more, please go and visit the MICCAI Student Board website, where you can find more information about the educational challenge. And if you want to know more about the events that we are organizing, follow us on social media. We have an account in Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So before moving forward, we are going to have a question and answer session at the end of the talk. So please write your question in the chat box. And this webinar is recorded, so it will be available afterwards if you miss parts of the webinar. And so without further ado, I will leave the stage to Dr. Aaron Fenster from the Roberts Research Institute in Western University that is here today to talk about careers in academia and beyond. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So yeah.
Okay. My screen has just come. Okay, so it's up now. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's quite an honor to describe to you, to talk to you about careers in academia and beyond. Just before I start, I think it's useful to know what my background is. Why am I qualified to talk to you about careers in academia and beyond? And so, of course, what I'm going to talk about today is completely my opinion. And in fact, since you are from different countries, you know, different countries, things are done possibly differently than we have here in Canada. So you have to, whatever I say, you have to take with a grain of salt, because it may not apply to you. But I hope you'll learn something. So it's completely, I want to emphasize that it's really my opinion and it's a Canadian experience. But nevertheless, I've been involved in academia. I founded the imaging research labs at our institute, the biomedical engineering program, and other components in our university. So I have a fair amount of experience in academia and hired people at faculty positions. I also founded 3 companies. So I've also hired people into companies. And I have quite a few publications and so on. So, you know, I do have an academic experience, so I can give you my experience in that sense. So the topics I'll cover, I'll start with getting an academic job. Of course, my graduate students, the first thing on their mind is getting a job, how to get the job in academia. Those who want to work in academia, how to prepare them for academia. So I give these kind of talks. I've given them in many centers, countries, in fact, about getting a job, at least in a Canadian environment, and it also applies to some other countries, US, probably UK, and many others, the same kind of issues. And then once you get a job, I'll describe very briefly about how to build a lab, because we are when you finish your PhD, you know how to do research, but how to build a lab is a different task. And then how to lead a lab, issues of leadership. And then how to be successful, you need issues that deal with issues of mentoring. And of course, to get funded grants, you have to deal with issues of innovation. You have to be innovative. So in fact, I give separate talks about each of those topics, and each one I cover probably in about 45 minutes. And here I'm going to compress everything into a pretty short time. So, of course, as you know, the first thing you have to do is build a resume, a CV, because when you when you try to get a job, you're going to send your resume, and CV to the potential place where you want to get a job. So the resume is the first introduction of you to the potential in department, university that will hire you. So the issue is you can't be modest. Some cultures emphasize modesty. Other cultures, in fact, de-emphasize modesty. At least my experience, certainly in Western countries, don't be modest. Modesty implies that you're not confident, and that is negative. So you have to describe your strengths without diminishing your strengths. Some individuals, I've reviewed many resumes, and then when I interview some individuals, they're much stronger than their CV shows because they underplay their capabilities, their accomplishments. So you have to list your leadership skills, in fact, leadership tasks, accomplishments, and you definitely do not diminish your contribution. Of course, you can't lie, you can't over-describe what you have done, but you certainly don't have to be modest. So you have to, in that case, if it's leadership and accomplishments, of course, you have to have something to do that. You have to something to describe. So in fact, so my advice, at least to my graduate students, is to, while doing research, to take on various leadership positions, the involvement in student societies, like the Student MICCAI Society, local university societies, even in your church, synagogue, mosque. There are leadership positions. If you're leading any sports events, those all are valuable. They all show leadership. It shows that you have initiative and leadership. So that's really important. And many centers, many universities look for leaders, potential leaders, at least when the individual progresses in the academic career, there will be leaders in the environment, in the university. And you have to demonstrate initiative, that you can do things. So that's, again, through leadership, because if you led a certain group task and you were successful, that shows that your initiative and you can carry through to the end. You have to demonstrate that you can work independently. It's kind of interesting that you have to show that you can work independently, yet that you can work with others. My last bullet will emphasize that. But certainly independent work also, and that in other words, your PhD, your publication, your first authorship or lead authorship in papers show some aspects of independence as well as working with others. You have to demonstrate that you can teach. Of course, in academia, you'll need to teach. So as a graduate student, you don't have many opportunities, but you can invite yourself to teach a course here or a lecture or seminar. You can organize a group of students and have a teaching experience through your colleagues in your lab. So that also is very valuable. And then the last point is the most important. When I interview potential hires into academic jobs, I look for individuals that can work with others. You certainly, I would not want to hire somebody who can't work with others. Basically, in academia, it's really a department or groups or institutes where the multiple faculty work together. And if one of the individuals is difficult to get along with, it really creates a very difficult situation. So among your CV or accomplishments, the critical aspects is ability to work with others. By the way, it's the same issue in industry. So, and then you submit your job application, right? You send your resume, your CV, and you have to make sure that it fits the job. You know, some individuals write the same CV and the same cover letter to whoever they apply to. Well, you have to make it different for each site, for each department, for each university. You have to think about where you're applying, what the institution is about, what is the department about, and you have to modify it to make yourself fit the job. Very important. And of course, you write a short cover letter. It's typically short. Some individuals write long cover letters. My experience is people don't read long cover letters. They read short cover letters. And one of the most important aspects of the cover letter is not what the institution can do for you, but what you can do for the institution. I'm kind of paraphrasing Kennedy, the president of the United States, if some of you know what I'm talking about. But I get many applicants who say they want to work in our university, our institute, because they want to expand their knowledge in certain area. They're interested in whatever we are doing, and they're going to get, they learn more about what we do. No, it's what you have to show. If you're applying for a job, you have to show what you can do for the institution. You have to show your strengths fit the institution and will complement or supplement what is going on and make the institution stronger. This is critical. And then, of course, you have to check for appearance errors, spelling. You have to make sure it looks good. Because if there are any spelling errors nowadays, spelling errors, grammar errors are not tolerated because they're online, of course, spellings and grammar checking software. So it has to be perfect in that sense. And then when you apply for a job, then usually there's a team of faculty members who review the applicants, and usually we get dozens, sometimes even up to 100 applicants, and then we go through them. We go and try to see from the CV, from the appearance, from the fitting the job, whether the individual merits at least another look. And we usually separate the applications into three piles. The garbage pile, meaning just the application thrown to the job into the garbage. Ones we can make up our mind, so it's kind of a maybe, and another pile is to consider. And of course, the maybe pile is essentially a garbage pile because it never get hardly ever look at them again. It's the consider pile that you want to be in. So therefore, if you've done everything right, your application will be in the consider pile. Consider doesn't mean, so it could be quite a few, it could be 10, 15 applications. And then the task for the committee is to select the top 3 for interviews. So you want to be, of course, in the top 3, so you have to have done everything right. Of course, you have to have a great PhD thesis. You have to then, in other words, have a good CV, and then a resume is describing your strengths and so on. You have to have all the, if the university, it's a teaching university, all the teaching aspects, you have to show that you have that experience, leadership, success, all those kind of intangibles that add to your strengths will cause you to rise to the top. When we get applicants, they all have good publications. I shouldn't say all, but majority have really good publications, conference presentations, and so on. So the separation between individuals is really the other aspects. So if you are on the top 3, you will be invited for an interview. So, so at the interview, you have to make, as soon as you come to the interview, the first person you meet, or in fact, every person you meet, you want to make a good impression immediately. As you all know, the first impression is the lasting impression, sometimes lasting impression. So usually the first impression, if it's a bad first impression, then you have quite a lot of work to do to upgrade the impression to move to the next level. So the first impression is quite critical. So which means you go to the interview, you have to be rested. You can't be really tired. You're going to be nervous. Of course, you may not be able to sleep well. Well, you have to find a way to be rested. You have to have a good handshake, right? You have to make sure your hand is not sweaty, and then have a hearty handshake, the limp handshake. Basically, you show confidence. These are all issues of confidence. You have to dress appropriately, of course. For men it's easy. For women, it's a little bit more difficult. Interesting, different countries, of course, have different customs on dress. For men, it's fairly uniform, but for women, it could vary. So when I gave this lecture in many countries, usually women ask me how should I dress in Western society. In lectures I've given not in Western countries, how to dress if they apply for a job in a Western country. Can women wear pants? Of course they can. But so it's very. But nonetheless, there are quite a few options. So of course, I can't give the women in the audience today, any code, any information about how to dress. So what I did is I asked my wife, who's a lawyer, how she would dress for a job interview. Well, she did when she was looking for a job as a lawyer, and she said it's very simple. She dresses the same way all the time. She wears black slacks, white shirt, and a black jacket. So that's sometimes she changes the white shirt to some other color, but not too loud, and that's how she dresses. So basically, kind of neutral dress, professional dress. And for men, I guess it's the same way, professional. Okay. So and then you have to be friendly. So when you meet somebody, you have to show that you're friendly. You have to smile, shake, feel comfortable, feel confident. Basically, you want to show confidence. You want to exude confidence. You want to feel relaxed, smile, shake hands, be comfortable, be able to talk without showing any nervousness. So how do you do that? That's very difficult. I remember my first job application, and very difficult. I was really nervous. I didn't dress appropriately. My hand was sweaty. I was nervous. I didn't smile. It was very difficult. By the way, I did get the job, but it took me a second meeting to do that. But that's a different story. And then what's important is if you get to the interview, that means you have a good chance of getting the job. So you should study the location, the institution, the department, the university. You have to know something about it. Don't go to the interview with knowing nothing about who you're going to meet, what the department does, what the institution is famous for. You have to have all these facts in your mind. And then when you talk to people, when they're going to be interviewing you, usually it's going to be a few people who will be interviewing you, at least in Canada and the US. It's typically you're going to be taken from one person to the other. So you have to know who these people are, done some research about them, so you can have a conversation with them. So this is important. In other words, these are not, the meeting, the interview is not an inquisition where the interviewer asks you questions and then you answer them. You have to feel comfortable and confident to have a conversation with the interviewer. And so a conversation means you have to be able to initiate the conversation about some aspect of the interviewer's career, publication, the department's strengths, some famous award they got, some famous paper they published, You met them at a conference, you can talk about that. So basically you generate a conversation rather than an inquisition. This is very important. So the person who is interviewing you feels very comfortable because you are comfortable. If you can have a conversation, it gives a very strong, good impression about you that you can work with others. You're a friendly person. You will get along with others. You will develop collaborations. You're an easy person to deal with. So all these are really, really important. Okay, and then of course you'll be asked about your work, your studies, your experience. The important thing is never say anything negative. I've interviewed people, potential faculty and of course postdocs, and when I look at their CV and I ask the kind of questions, in a few cases the individual said, oh, I had some bad experience with my supervisor, whatever the issue was. That's very bad to do. Don't say anything negative, even if you've had a negative experience in your department, your university, or with your faculty, or with anybody. Keep everything positive. Everything, highlight all the positive things you've experienced. Very important, again, because it shows a person, really a positive kind of person who can work with others, that everybody wants to work with because you're a positive person, right? So this is kind of life advice about getting along with others. And then the most important thing is you have to be engaged. You have to appear engaged. You have to appear aware. I'm using all these kind of words because it's difficult to really describe. You have to feel passionate. You have to about your work, right? You have to be alive. You have to be. Your mind has to be. You have to demonstrate that your mind is active and interested in research, in inquiry, in people, in students. You have to be show that you are really looking to do things that will be better for everybody, right? So you have to show that kind of thing. And it's very difficult. If you're an introvert, as I am, it is very difficult to demonstrate that because you are nervous. You're sitting there. The interviewer is a senior professor, is going to ask you questions, and yet you have to show that you are engaged, your mind is active, you are interested in things, you're interested in learning things and in research and development or whatever it is that the job is about. So it's very difficult if you're an introvert, as I said. So I advise my students is to really to be outside themselves. I don't know if you understand that. Actors essentially take on a different personality, so they can be quite introverts. Yet when they go on stage, they appear to be an extrovert. They're able to talk in front of course, many people, in front of others, and so they're actually outside themselves. So if you feel that you cannot show this kind of passion for life, for research, for interaction with others, then you almost have to be outside yourself to do that. And I give that advice to my students, and some understand what I mean and are actually able to do it. They're introverts, and yet when they go in front of another person, they're almost a different person and able to get the other person really engaged in them. So that's the first interview is critical, and then so there are some other aspects, right? So the medium is the message in the first interview, right? You have to dress appropriately, carry as little as possible, so you don't feel uncomfortable and drop things. When you're going to be asked to give a talk, so you have to check your zipper if you're a guy, if you're a woman, hosiery, makeup. If it's raining, snowing, you're not going to get wet. Check your hair. Basically, you have to go to the bathroom just before you give a talk or before you meet people, and you just check everything. It sounds silly, but I've seen these kind of disasters happen where guys with issues with zipper, have they forgotten to zip up or not? They couldn't remember, and they felt nervous throughout the talk. Women where makeup was running because going between buildings in the university, it was a bit wet, and they got a little bit of rain on them. So basically, just take a break before a talk, Get yourself together, check everything, feel comfortable, take a deep breath, and then you'll be ready to give the talk and feel comfortable and confident giving the talk. It's just a simple advice. So, as I said, I'm emphasizing during the interview, you have to show that you know something about the institution. You ask questions and you have a conversation. Another important thing is during the interview, it may take a day or a day and a half. Sometimes there are meals. So the meal is part of the interview. Don't think that a dinner after a tough day of meeting with people is kind of outside the interview. It's all part of it. So you have to choose something easy to eat, so you don't feel uncomfortable with things splashing on you, or you're going to be talking a lot. So you have to eat something really simple. Alcohol is a big issue. It depends on the culture. Some cultures no alcohol. In other cultures, alcohol is mandatory. Right? So my advice is either no alcohol, if that's possible in a certain culture, or as little as possible. I've been in situations, I don't drink much. In fact, I drink almost nothing. But I've been in places where there's a fair amount of alcohol at dinner, and everybody gets a little bit, as you know, when you drink alcohol, what happens. So because I wanted to make a good impression, I stayed away as much as I can from alcohol. Or if the host provides alcohol, you're not going to turn it down if it's possible, then I kind of sip it, or I touch my lips. I don't drink it even through the evening. So you want to be able to continue to be in control the whole time, and be able to say appropriate things and avoid topics like politics, religion, anything personal. Those kind of things may come up depending on your background, your politics, how you dress, but so basically try to avoid all these discussions, because they you'll end up offending somebody. And of course, you have to, at the dinner, you can ask you can now stimulate discussion by asking about the university or company, if it's spun out of the lab and so on. So basically, you should show control, you show comfort, that you're comfortable. And they don't bring up any salary issues. Don't say, how much is this job paid? This is the first interview, so basically you want them to want you. So you don't bring up yet all kind of issues that are potentially negative: salary, visa, spousal, immigration. Now, stay away from, if you can, from all those issues. If you get, and they will come up later. And then when you go home, you draft a thank you letter, a thank you note to everybody that you met, and you say, and you thank them for their time and so on. And of course, your references will be contacted, so you have to make sure that references know that they may be contacted. It's also very important. So when you get a call back, now they want you, right? At the beginning, the interview so far has been you want them, and when you get a call, that means they want you, and they will try to convince you to come, because now you're the number one or number two or number three, if the number one or two have turned down the job. So now you can deal with all the issues: where to live, spousal issues, all kind of things. All kind of things can come up. You can bring up, of course, salary will be one of them. Okay, and you get the job. So now that you got the job, what now? So this is another big issue: how to build a lab. Right? So as I said early on, when you're a graduate student, you learn to do research, you learn to publish, and then you get a job, you're thrown in, like you're now an assistant professor or a lecturer, and you're expected to build a lab and, of course, be successful. But you have no training in leadership. You have no idea how to do that. So you can emulate your supervisor, but that's not always a good thing to do, depending on your opinion about your supervisor's ability to lead a lab. whether it's positive or negative. If it's been positive, then you can certainly emulate, but is it appropriate to emulate? Because you're going to be starting out, and your supervisor may be already a mid-career or senior scientist, and so leadership at different levels is potentially different. So you have to think about how to lead a lab. Most new faculty never think about that, and until they run into trouble. There's all kind of potential problems along the way to building a lab and being successful. So the one thing I want you to think about is what makes a lab successful. What will make it successful? Most people say good science, right, is number one, and that's what you did during your PhD, postdoctoral years, publish, good science, get well known. Others will think political savvy, how to get money, facilities in the university. Others think that maybe funding, how to get money, startup money from the university, grant funding, how to do that. Others may believe that getting smart, enthusiastic people in the lab, you get good graduate students and they will carry the lab. And very few think leadership is important. And my opinion is exactly the opposite. My opinion is leadership is critical. Good leaders will generate a successful, enthusiastic lab of people working hard towards the common goal of success. A good leader will be able to find collaborators, find connections in conferences, and be able to come up with good ideas and get good grants funding. A good leader will be able to understand the situations in a university and know the political climate within the university and be able to navigate through the university as a junior faculty and get the resources needed for their research. And good science, of course, is needed. There's no doubt. But a leader will be able to stimulate their students to do good science. So so the issue is how to be a good leader. So the thing is, you have to know what a leader is not. So a leader is not someone who talks the loudest. And many of you may have experiences. If you're an introvert, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you've been in groups where one individual was the loudest, and that individual dominated the group. But that's not leadership. Leadership is not somebody who dominates. Leadership, you've been in a situation maybe where an individual had charisma. The charisma takes different forms, and you've seen it in politics in your countries. But a leader is not necessarily somebody with charisma. Somebody with charisma can lead the group in the wrong way, as we know historically. So, in fact, a leader is not somebody who is the smartest. Leadership is beyond those. Leadership is not about domination, but the art of persuading people to work towards a common goal. Right? So this is very different. And so it's persuading people, not forcing them, not dominating them, not shouting them, not through their appearance and charisma, not because they're smart and naturally they're natural leaders, but it's the intangible aspect of leadership, ability to sway the group, your students, your lab men, your staff, to work towards a common goal. So this is really difficult. I give a whole hour lecture about leadership. So I'm giving you only a couple of slides about it. But again, I want to emphasize a boss is not a leader. A boss drives. A leader sets a vision for the lab, in this case, the lab. A boss says, go. A leader says, let's go. So there's a small nuance difference. A boss knows how it's done. But leader shows how to get it done. A boss says, I. A leader says, we. You can see that often in how people write and how they talk. A boss fixes blame. If something goes wrong, a boss will fix blame, will blame people. A leader fixes what is wrong, right? It identifies what is wrong. It doesn't blame people, but just develops a team, a method, or does it themselves by fixing things. So these are what a leader is not. So what is it? How do you lead a lab? So there are many styles, and I'm not going to go through them. There are many styles of leadership, and there are no correct or incorrect style. Well, there are incorrect styles, as I just described, but there are no correct styles, because different styles of leadership are appropriate for different types of labs and different times in your career and different situations in your lab. So the times to be coercive, right? You want to tell the team to do something because it's really important, and that's appropriate at times when there's a crisis. You can't sit around and talk about it. If you have a vision and you know what to do, and there's a crisis, you got to get everybody to do it. Or there are other authoritative approaches where you get everybody to go with you towards that goal, to convince people to work on that vision. Or affiliative, meaning people come first, you kind of modify things, you create bonds, emotional bonds with your lab members. And that's important when there's a personal crisis in the lab. As you have students, well, you are all students, so the situation arises. In a lab, there are all kind of the personal things in life, from issues in family or issue of friends and partners, and therefore, as a leader, you have to understand them. You have to have an emotional bond with them, and so on. I'm not going to go through them, but there are different styles at each stage. So basically, once if you have now developed a leadership style, now research advances require some other aspects. Research is highly competitive. There are many labs in the world working on the same thing you're working on. So it's really competitive. The advances are between fields, the interface of different fields. And so in some cases, you need big teams and big labs to accomplish, in fact, important things. And you need extensive infrastructure. So what do you need? So how do you navigate it, especially when you're starting out? So you need mentors, partners, collaborators. You need multidisciplinary teams. And so these are important things. So you need all of them. And so I'm going to focus on one aspect only. And as I said, that's a separate lecture, an hour lecture about how to build a lab, what to do. But I'm only talking about mentorship, because that's, I believe, the most important thing. When you're starting out, a new faculty, you're a postdoc or faculty, or even a graduate student, it is good to find a mentor. A mentor in most universities have mentorship committees where you meet with one or two or three faculty members who are supposed to give you advice, and you meet them once or twice a year. They don't work very well because you only meet them once or twice a year. You need somebody who's active and committed to your research, to your success, right? So you need somebody who's not necessarily a collaborator, but somebody who's really committed to working with you to help you as you develop your research program. And that's, by the way, a lifelong mentorship. It could be lifelong mentorship. And so you have to help you form linkages with other departments and help you become visible at conferences. And if you're a junior faculty, maybe introduce you to other scientists, help you with in various ways by showing you different directions for research and so on. So the mentorship is quite important in that sense. So there are different levels of mentorship as you go through your career, from being an undergraduate to a new investigator, an established investigator. I'm really talking towards the end for a new investigator. So, of course, a mentorship will help you dealing with all the issues around developing a research program, from hopefully issues around clinical research in connection to basic research. If you have a senior mentor who understands the situation, will help you navigate all those issues. So, of course, we are in this kind of interface between basic and clinical research, and therefore this kind of mentorship is critical. So so there are good mentors who understand the importance of their role, and they will help you build skills, open doors for you, promote your work, promote your networking, and because they'll understand your goals. And so therefore, it's not once or twice a year meeting. It's almost daily meetings. It's somebody you can almost pop into their office anytime and sit down, have a coffee together, and talk about career and direction and students and problems and so on. And so that is quite. So in our group, in our imaging group in London, we have done that. So we have a quite close group of individuals, and the senior individuals can mentor the junior individuals. So if you don't have that, you have to look for it. And then the last point is innovation. So when you're building a research program, how to generate an innovation pipeline for your research, how to, because to get grants, to become known, you need to have innovative research rather than a Me Too research or bandwagon research, as we call it, right? So you want to be, so how to be innovative is very difficult. I believe probably the most difficult thing is how to come up with a good idea that's innovative. And if you have one good idea per year, then you are very lucky, because this can be the basis of a research program. So how to do that is there are many books. If you go to the library, and you'll find many books written about innovations, how to be innovative. So I'm not going to give you a consensus, a listing of all the books and how to do it. I'll just summarize them very briefly in a couple of minutes. So I think, so it's my opinion, the path in innovation is to be aware. To be driven by knowledge, to try to acquire knowledge, right? Not to be highly focused on your own little thing, but to be open to all kind of information. So basically, you have to acquire information from all fields, not just your own specific sector. So you have to go to conferences and not just go to the sessions that describes your own work, type of work that you do, but you have to go to other sessions to learn about other aspects, in this case, in medical imaging. So you can go to clinical sessions. That's what I did early on in my career. I went to clinical sessions to try to find out what are the big clinical problems, the big unmet needs. And then I would use my technical capabilities to try to solve them and come up with good ideas. But you have to know what the problems are. So you have to acquire knowledge. And then if you have all this kind of knowledge in your head, then you need inspiration. And the inspiration can come from yourself or from a team. So if it comes from yourself, then you're very lucky if you come up with these ideas yourself. But usually it comes up from team discussion. If you have a good bunch of students are innovative or at least open to ideas, then you can get into a discussion, kick ideas around. Don't say no to ideas. Just try to expand on ideas and see where they go. And then you can develop a consensus. Is this a really innovative idea based from the team, from whether the team is students, whether the team is other faculty members working together on a certain area? And then you have to look at the credibility of the idea, basically market research, to see if it's really an unmet need, that's truly an unmet need. And that you probably need to talk to physicians and to try to see if it really will solve a big problem. If your good idea, your solution will change the way clinical practice is carried out. And then action. So innovation only is innovative if you take it all the way to action. You actually do something. And then, an inspiration is the most difficult. If you want to generate your own ideas, then you have to be inspired, and that's really the most difficult aspect of the pipeline. How to be inspired. So you have to have lots of fact. You have to think laterally, not linearly, and then you can come up with what's called the aha moment. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but when you have all these ideas in your head kicking around, and you met some physicians who talk, or you went to a conference and you found that there is an unmet need in this disease. And in your mind, things are kicking around, bouncing around, basically noise in your brain, kicking things, all the knowledge of technical knowledge, the technical information you've heard about outside your field, and then the clinical unmet needs. And all of a sudden, you'll have this kind of flash, the aha moment. It's called aha moment. Many books have been written about that. And it'll be like in the pictures, you've seen this light bulb over the head. Well, it's very much like that. All of a sudden you say, it's crystal clear. The solution is obvious now. It's only obvious to you, but it's obvious. And if you can experience something like that, you'll be very lucky. Because it's transformative in terms of your career. So basically, to be inspired, the approaches is to know what the problem is, as I said, and you have to be curious to have collected lots of information, and you have to be able to decompose the problem into its components, so you can assemble all the information you have, whether it's through a team-based discussion or personal thinking, sitting on a bench like Einstein did, sitting on a bench and just thought about it and it came to him. So those are various mechanisms to do it. So I try to leave some time for questions. So in summary, nobody teaches you how to be successful in academia. There's no lessons or no courses, but hopefully talks like this that students tend to organize will help you along the way. So there are many paths to success and there are many paths to failure. And so I believe the key elements are leadership, innovation, mentoring, and of course, networking. Okay, so with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for your very interesting talk. Yeah, we're going to have a question and answering session now. There are already some questions in the Q&A box. Everyone keep writing your questions if you have any more questions. So we'll start with the first one. It's actually anonymous, and it's asking what kind of questions might be expected for a postdoc position interview.
So for a postdoc looking for a job in a university, I understand. So the obvious questions they'll start with about your work, and then they will probably so that's obvious. But the other question that you probably would not expect is so there are a number of questions that sometimes some people throw out, like they'll say, "What is your biggest strength?" or what was the biggest problem you faced in your research as a graduate student or as a postdoc? Right? So these are kind of questions about character. Questions about your career, about your publication are pretty obvious. So a very, very difficult question for women is about spouses, about children. So I raise this because this is I've had postdocs, female postdocs come to me asking me for advice when those situations arise. So I bring it up. So in some countries, you're not allowed to ask those kind of questions. In Canada, you're not allowed to ask those questions. In the US, in some areas, you're not allowed to ask questions about that. But in some other countries, they're asked. And I've had postdocs from other countries, obviously female, with children, 2 children, who could not get a job in academia because they got to the interview because the CV is spectacular, and they were asked, "Do you have any children?" And of course, you have to say yes. And you have a spouse? No, I'm separated from a spouse. And essentially, she could see that she would not get a job because the obvious thinking is no spouse, children get sick, she'll miss work, not be able, first priority is children, and so on and so on. So it's very difficult for females. You have to be, so you can't lie. So I'm now talking about specific question for women. So of course you have to tell the truth. So you have to say, you have to say if you have a spouse, your spouse will take care of, you have to immediately talk about spouse taking care of the children. The spouse is committed to my research, to my career. They'll, that's how it was. Basically, you have to give comfort. I have to eliminate this issue. If you ask the question, are you planning to have children? Again, not allowed in some countries, but it does come up. You have to say, I do not plan to have children. My career comes first until it's established. You can't say I never will. Well, some women may say I don't want to have children, but most interviewers will not believe it. So you have to say that I want to establish my career first, and children will come much later, right? So those are unfortunately may come up in some areas. So for men, it's going to be leadership questions about it. But the most difficult questions I've seen is what's your biggest weakness? And that has come up. How did you deal with the most difficult situation? Those kind of questions are at the faculty level, at all levels. I've seen every hire we've made. Those questions came up. How did you deal with it? How did you deal with the most difficult situation you encountered? And what's your biggest strength and weakness?
Just to talk about weaknesses, how do you answer to this question? Because you have to show that, okay, it's a weakness, but you can also overcome it somehow,
no.
Right?
So my opinion, so I'm giving you my opinion. You should ask your supervisor their opinion. I'm giving my opinion only. In all these answers, it's just purely my opinion. So it may not be worth much, but that's what it is. So I would turn a weakness into a strength. In other words, wherever you can, don't talk about weaknesses, problems, trouble. So if they ask you, what's your biggest weakness? You have to say, my biggest weakness, I'm an alcoholic. Not alcohol, sorry, a workaholic. I'm a workaholic. I work long hours. My PhD, I was so excited about my PhD that I worked so hard. I worked way late into the night. My postdoc, I had a paper and I wanted to meet a deadline. I worked all night. So you're turning a weakness into a strength. Some people call workaholics a weakness, and you're turning it into a strength.
Yeah, thank you. So the second question in the chat box is again from anonymous person and is very general. There are many decisions that we would have to make, many opportunities where we have to choose whether to take them or not. How do we judge this opportunity to know if they will help us in growing as a person or academic person?
Yeah, also, it's a really, really good question. So, in fact, I was just asked to write a book chapter about my career path and the hinge points, the opportunities that I've taken or have not taken. So, exactly dealing with this issue. So, it's very difficult so there are continuous opportunities in your career for, change. Well, the obvious one is a new job offer. So, there's no simple answer to that. It depends on you, depends on your personality, and of course, it depends what the opportunity is, and you have to weigh them. So I found earlier in your career, you can take risks. Later in your career, it's a bit more difficult to take risks. When you're early in your career, the penalty is not that big because you're just starting up a lab, and so the opportunities in a research direction, a collaboration, a change in location. So for collaborations, the answer is very simple. The answer is yes. If somebody offers to collaborate with you, say yes. Don't be afraid that they're going to steal your ideas or your students or whatever. Say yes. Somebody wants to share a student with you or wants to participate in research with one of your students, say yes. And early on, I made a mistake and I said no a couple of times. In later years, I regretted it because I thought back of the opportunity I missed by not collaborating with the individual. When you get an opportunity to give a talk somewhere, always say yes. And this will go probably through a career. Some individuals, students have come to me, junior faculty have come to me and said, I was asked to give a talk, but I'm not comfortable giving the talk because it's slightly outside my field. And I told the individual, give the talk anyways. Because it'll raise your profile. It's obvious what it will do. And then, then they said, well, I have to travel from Canada to Italy, and I have a young child, and they're sick, and lots of excuses. I say, well, figure it out, but go anyways. So she went, overnight, gave the talk, and came back the same day from Italy, right? So basically 2 days travel, and gave the talk, and from that moment on, she became world famous. So you never know what opportunity is available to you when the opportunity comes. Changing jobs is a bit more difficult because because basically and that requires you to understand where you're going, right? What the opportunity is. So the question, what do you weigh? So students have come to me and they've had this opportunity. In fact, they got one of my students had 2 job offers in the U.S. One job offer was lots of startup in a new university, a new biomedical engineering program, but it was a remote, it's not the top university, but they really wanted her with lots of money and facilities. And another one was a top university in the US, but they gave her hardly anything, small lab, hardly any startup. And, so she asked me, well, I get nothing. Top university salary is low compared to that, all those kind of negatives. So I suggested to her to go to the top university, low salary, small lab, because there are many potential collaborators. And then, so that decision was not salary, not startup, not big lab, but potential collaborators in a research environment. And, well, her career is very successful. She publishes in Science now. She publishes better than me.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions coming up. In the interest of time, I'm going to select some that have been asked by more than one person. So, for example, this question has been asked by multiple people in the same area. The question is in the order, so one of the questions is, are postdocs mandatory to start an academic career? And then a similar question, is there a natural progression for applying for jobs? That is PhD to research assistant and postdoc fellow, and then lecturer professorship.
So, of course, different universities, different countries, there are different paths. A majority of countries now, a postdoc is required. Thinking back, by the way, so when I finished my PhD, so I'm a baby boomer, if some of you know what that means, post-war baby. And, at that time, people got, at the end of my PhD, I was getting job offers because the universities were expanding and so on and so on. Nowadays, it's quite the opposite. It's very tough to get a job. There are many applicants. So you need to demonstrate independence, some kind of independence, and that's a postdoc position. So all the people I know who've gotten, at least in North America, who got jobs in the universities are out of postdocs. So that's the path. And then the next step would be, well, different universities have different paths. It could be a lecturer position, and it could be, of course, assistant professor level. So that's a very typical path nowadays. So when you do a postdoc, if you're interested in an academic position, it's a very difficult decision where to go. It's a separate discussion. What kind of postdoc? And once you're in a postdoc, how do you demonstrate, how do you position yourself for a good job later? So the one word, since we don't have much, but by the way, I have times if you want to continue to talk, I'm okay. But I'll tell you one thing as a postdoc what you should do. In fact, as a graduate student also, networking, critical, network. So you go to conferences, meet people from other universities, other labs. Even if they're graduate students, you go to dinner with them, go to lunch with them, talk to them at conferences. because if you, and that will lead, and that basically will, first of all, you'll find out what's available and what kind of environment it is, and you'll get known. And this will open up doors for you.
Thank you so much. We have time just for other couple of questions. One of this is, what is your opinion on switching between academia and industry? Are there big obstacles in our community, or is it more accepted now than used to be?
Yeah, so that's also a good question. So when I was doing my PhD, going to industry was a failed PhD. Now it's different. Of course, it's different in different countries. So I don't want to generalize, but at least in half of our students go to industry. Some of our students have spun off companies from their PhD. And this is now considered a positive. Countries now, certainly Canada and other countries now value commercialization. They're looking at stimulation of the economy. So in fact, they're beginning to look at universities as an engine of economic growth rather than knowledge growth. So nowadays, I don't want to generalize, but it depends on the country and which university, but generally, a job in industry is not negative, it's a big positive. Universities now in Canada, they're going to have to report how many of their trainees have ended up in industry. And that will generate money for the university from the government. So it's becoming important. So don't think of yourself, if you have interest in industry, don't think of it as a negative, think of it as a positive. For your university and in fact for your lab, for your supervisor. My students go to industry. I can get grants by stating that I've trained individuals who are now in the industry and contributing to Canadian economic growth. It's quite amazing. Things have really changed.
Okay, so just for a couple more questions. By the way, I apologize to people who are not going to get their questions answered live. This one's a bit more specific by Michael. Talking about hiring process in industry, we often see various offline tests for applicants, such as coding tests. In academia, do you have an experience of running similar tests? And if so, what kind of tests?
No, I have not seen it certainly in our university or other universities in Canada. I've not seen any kind of tests. The tests are the interview process, as I described. No tests.
So maybe the last question.
It's okay. if anybody wants, I'm okay. I don't have anything.
So the last question, and then we wrap up. So one anonymous attendee says, I sometimes feel that I'm not ready or not good enough to apply for a faculty position. Do you have any advice to determine if I need more training or if I'm ready to apply?
Yes. I hate to generalize. This is called the Impostor Syndrome. There's a name for it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Have you heard of it? So imposter syndrome, you never feel good enough. And this is a problem. So it's an individual problem. You have to, some individuals have exactly the opposite. And I've interviewed both. I've seen faculty members with both. Even if they get a job, they still feel they're not good enough. A senior faculty who are internationally known for their research still feel that they're not good enough, that they are somehow not deserving of whatever whatever the position is. I don't know whoever asked the question. Of course, I don't know the circumstances. I can't give you specific advice, but just remember. So some individuals are boastful. When they talk about themselves and they talk about great things they've done. They're exactly the opposite, and of course sometimes it goes. They can get resources and success and so on. And top scientists, some top scientists are like that, and yet in others feel that they're not good enough. So so it's not just early in the career, it's throughout your career. So you have to look at yourself and look at your credentials and feel good about them. So you really have to feel good about yourself and your credentials. And I would guess, I would suspect that you are ready for a job. I'm talking to everybody, not to the individual. I suspect you're all ready for academic jobs. So the important thing is, how do you sell yourself? So if you feel that you're not adequate and you go to an interview, it'll come through, unfortunately, and you will not get the job. So you have to feel confident. You have to feel that you belong, that you can contribute, and then you'll have a better chance of getting the job. So it's really a tough issue it's really a personal issue that you have to deal with.
So thank you so much again for accepting our invitation and this very interesting discussion. And I thank everyone for participating today. I also would like to thank the MICCAI Society for supporting us, Shelley Wallace and Jeanette Wallace, that have been contributing in organizing this amazing webinar. And I hope to see everyone to our next meeting. See you.